Yesterday I started digging the holes for the new footings of the deck. There's a bit of a knack to digging the holes, so I thought I would share it with you. I'm using a spade and a fork that are 20 centimetres across, which is super handy because that's the width of hole that I want. It's the width of hole that's recommended by Postcrete, which is the product that I'm going to be using. It comes in a bag like this, you pour it into the hole and then add water. I'll show you that part when I get to it. For now I'm digging the hole. It also recommends that it's 75 centimetres deep. This ground is really solid, so I'm also getting in there with some basic garden tools to scoop out the soil. For the most part it's soil and stones and sometimes entire bricks that I have to find a way to force out. Usually I crack them in half with a chisel and a hammer. But on occasion I will find myself some pieces of treasure. It's probably from the 60s, but I like to imagine that it's some sort of antique piece. At the bottom of your hole is a good idea to add in a breeze block like this. This is what the wood is going to sit on, and it means it's not going to sink any further into the ground. This breeze block has a much wider surface area than the bottom of the post. It also means it's not sitting directly on the soil, which will prevent it from rotting. I'd not made this hole quite big enough, or rather, I probably made the breeze block a little bit too big. I had 2 breeze blocks left over from a previous project, which was perfect. So I cut them in half and now I have 4 for the footings of my deck. To make 2 into 4, I needed to cut these in half. And the trouble with that is, I don't have the right tools. So I have this chisel and I have this hammer. The chisel is not really wide enough for what I want to do. There is a chisel that is designed for this, that is much wider. And all you do with that is score a line across and then crack it a few times and it breaks naturally across the line. But this is so narrow that I'm having to tap it so many times to try and to manufacture a line. It's just not the right tool. I thought I could get away with it, but I can't. I persisted for a while, nevertheless, and in the end went to pick up the actual tool I needed from the shop. In case you wondered, this is what it looks like. It's actually called a bolster rather than a chisel when it gets to this sort of size. Anyway, where was I? Oh, yeah, I was making the hole bigger for this breeze block. In this hole, I found something that I found quite remarkable, and it was a root. It was a very, very thick root, which made me think it was probably from my rose bush, which is over 2.5 meters away. It feels impossible that the roots could have travelled so far through such hard ground, but there's no other plant nearby that could possibly have come from. Every now and again as I was digging, I would find yet another brick, like here. I had to use this to break it apart to be able to pull it out of the hole. Just saw it getting yeeted out just then. It was now officially deep enough for me to put this breeze block in, but it wasn't sitting quite flat, and I realised that the bottom of the hole was slightly rounded. I hadn't really dug up the soil in the far corners very well. So even after I tried to tap it down with a hammer, it wasn't fitting, so remove more of the soil before having another crack at putting it down the bottom of the hole and measuring to make sure that it was now at the right height. I realised after I posted my last video that I showed you this scene where I had sawed off the top of a screw to help me take out this post in the corner. It didn't really work, to be honest. I ended up needing to go around the back and saw the screw in half. But what I'd missed out was all of the fun bits before I got to that point. Why did I need to remove the screw head at all? Well, this is how it started. I had a bunch of these screws that go through the wood directly into the wall. And most of them weren't coming out. They just started spinning in the screw head, removed the thread, and then they were impossible to take out. There was no chance after that they were ever going to come out. But if this is set into the ground, why does this even need to be screwed into the wall anyway? The reason that I decided to screw this directly into the wall is because this is one side of my hammock stand. The other one is the other side of my pond. I was a bit worried that these weren't really strong enough to be weight bearing for a hammock, so I screwed them into the wall for extra security. I was trying to cut through the screws, and as I did, the blade on my electric saw bent in a really weird way. I don't think that's going to be recoverable. And that's because that blade wasn't designed to be used on metal. I totally forgot that I changed it out when I was using it on some wood and forgot to replace it with this blade, which is designed for use on metal. This was me sawing through the head of the screw. It was also catching some of the wood, which is why it's making that flame. And I hoped that once I had removed the screw head and the washer, the screw would just fall through the hole in the wood because it was made slightly bigger than the screw when I did it. Alas, you'll know from yesterday's video that that plan didn't work out. I'm not sure what these little tappy taps are. They weren't necessary. But as always, I'm showing you this because these are all of the hurdles. These are all of the little problems that came up that I had to solve that took ages. And it's definitely the case that sometimes you can spend a couple of hours trying to solve something that doesn't work out. Just like this. Very frustrating. This screw at the bottom I'm having to cut at a very awkward angle because the blade was too long and it would have bashed into the wall. So that made sawing this off quite a lot more difficult. Also, something to note, I have learned the hard way more times than I can count. If you've just sawn through a piece of metal, it will be hot. It will be too hot to handle. As in, don't touch it. It looks cool, but it's not. It will burn your hands. Anyway, let's not dwell on this too much because, as you know, I did manage to eventually get this out. So this part of the project is now finished. Don't know if you've noticed already, but this entire wall area is coming away. That needs to be rebuilt before I can put the deck in. Which, another job that needs to be doing. After taking out the fence posts in this corner yesterday, I filled in the hole and I watered it. I wanted to compact the soil to make it a little bit easier for me to dig out a fresh hole that is the size that I wanted. That's why I'm doing these little patter-patters with my feet. I'm also removing a bunch of the soil underneath there so that I can replace it with some stones. I'm not going too deep because the other side of this is actually a flower bed. So I went as deep as the wall is thick. This wall is just decorative. It's not holding anything up, so I'm not too fussed about making this look anything special. And I say that because if you were building a wall from scratch, you wouldn't start it on a whole bunch of soil. You would dig down, put in some foundations, and add your bricks on top. Or at least that's the extent of my knowledge of wall building. But I know it's not this. Now that I've cleared this out, this is going to be ready for me to set some new bricks in as one of my next jobs. Luckily, I have some bricks left over from some previous projects, so I can reutilise these in the gap. I was trying to work out if I wanted to rebuild that wall today, so I needed a little garden snack to get my thinking cap on. I decided not to rebuild the wall today because I need to do it all at once when the mortar is all wet. It's a job for another day. Another job that I did before I finished up for today was to take all of these materials downstairs. Mostly because they were cluttering up my living room, but also because we don't need any more tree poop on my stairs. Talking of tree poop, the stairs have come out amazingly. Here's the result of what the stair runner looks like now that it's been cleaned. My shadow's in the way. It's not at all sticky, but completely soft. Does need a bit of a vacuum. Happy with that result? Next week I'm going to be on a long-awaited holiday, a week of annual leave. I know, it's super rude because I'm in the middle of a project, but I will return to this when I get back. So there's no videos next week. I will be resting and recuperating and preparing myself for the hard slog of every single thing going wrong when I get back. So, as always, if you've liked this video, don't forget to press the subscribe button.